I knew something was wrong the moment the auditorium lights dimmed and the applause swelled like a rising tide. I'd been backstage before, a dozen times, helping with award shows, presentations, demonstrations, always behind the scenes, always invisible, always the quiet mind behind something brighter. But this night was different. This night, I wasn't supposed to be behind anything. I was supposed to be on that stage. My name, Alice, should have been printed on the program. I should have been the one seated in the front row, waiting for the announcement. I should have been the one being mic'd up by the technician who kept glancing at me like he couldn't understand why I was still standing in the shadows like some forgotten intern. But instead, I stood frozen, my palms damp, my stomach hollow, watching my older brother Ethan stride onto the stage as though he owned it, my stage, my moment, my work clutched tightly in his hands. My project, he said into the microphone, calm and eloquent. My algorithm. My breakthrough. The words sliced through me, so cleanly I almost didn't feel the first cut. It was the second one that made me flinch, the one he said with that little humble laugh he practiced in the mirror, the one that always charmed interviewers. It took everything in me, but I knew I could pull it off. Everything in him. Everything. My throat tightened so fast I nearly choked on my own breath. Every sleepless night, every coffee-saturated hour, every debugging session that made my eyes burn, he was crediting it all to himself. Not even an acknowledgement. Not even a hint of shared effort. My name did not exist. The auditorium erupted in applause. The host shook Ethan's hand. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Journalists scribbled. Camera lenses zoomed in. The award committee's smiles grew wide and polished. And I felt myself unravel. I didn't know whether I was trembling or whether the floor itself was shifting under me. It felt like I was dissolving, like my skin was too thin, like every bone in my body was hollow. The applause hammered inside my ears until it wasn't cheering anymore. It was taunting. It was laughing. It was suffocating. The technician beside me said, "Are you all right?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because for the first time in my 30 years alive, I felt something inside me collapse so entirely it left a crater. And beneath that crater, something else stirred. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't helplessness. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, metallic clarity that sliced through the fog of shock. The kind that builds when a lifetime of being overshadowed suddenly combusts all at once. The kind that wakes up a part of you that's been quiet for too long. The kind that whispers, "He chose war, and you're done surrendering." But before the clarity fully took shape, the memories came. Memories I didn't ask for. Memories that arrived uninvited, crashing into me like waves. Ethan at 12, standing in front of our parents with a school trophy I earned but handed to him because I was terrified he'd get upset if he didn't win. Ethan at 16, presenting the robotics design I built with my own hands to a panel of judges who later praised him as the innovative prodigy of the next century. Ethan at 22, smiling as our parents toasted to his brilliant future, while I washed dishes in the kitchen, pretending not to hear. Every time I let it go. Every time I convinced myself it didn't matter. Every time I told myself, next time will be mine. But this wasn't childhood. This wasn't school. This wasn't a sibling rivalry, a petty contest, or a jealous moment. This was my career, my field, my breakthrough, my name, my future, the algorithm I had worked on for nearly a year, the one I tested across thousands of behavioral data points, the one that could predict early mental health deterioration trends in large populations, the one that could save institutions millions if implemented correctly, was the reason this award existed. This wasn't just recognition. This was a life-changing opportunity. £200,000 in grant funding, a paid research position, partnership offers, global press coverage, everything I needed to propel my career forward. And Ethan stole it with the charm of a practiced liar and the ease of someone who'd done this his whole life. But this time, he didn't just steal attention. He stole my destiny. My legs felt weak as I slowly backed away from the curtain. I couldn't watch him smile like that. I couldn't listen to him accept an award he didn't earn. I couldn't stand in that suffocating cloud of betrayal any longer. I walked straight out of the backstage door, the cold night air slamming into me like a slap. I gulped it down, trying to steady myself, trying to stop the tremor in my hands. The city lights blurred, the cars hummed faintly, and I leaned against the brick wall behind the venue, gripping the rough surface like it was the only thing keeping me standing. My phone buzzed, 3 messages from my parents. "So proud of Ethan. We're watching the live stream. Wish you were here." I laughed. Or maybe I sobbed. It felt like a terrifying mix of both. They didn't even know I was in the building. I didn't reply. I let the phone fall into my coat pocket, feeling more numb than angry, more hollow than hurt. But that didn't last long. Because as I stood there, staring at the pavement, the numbness slowly evaporated, replaced by something hotter. Something heavier. Something deeper. The truth. The raw, unforgiving truth. Ethan didn't see me as a sister. He saw me as a threat, a resource, a mine to mine, a tool to use, and he counted on my silence. He counted on the fact that I never fought back. He counted on the fact that our parents would never believe me. He counted on the fact that I wasn't the charismatic one, the confident one, the one the world instinctively trusted. He counted on me staying small. But he made one fatal mistake. He forgot that quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet doesn't mean blind. Quiet doesn't mean surrender. Quiet means calculating. And as I stood alone in the cold London night, a decision formed with the precision of a blade sliding into place. He wanted credit. He wanted fame. He wanted the world to see him as brilliant. Fine. Then the entire world would also see what he truly was. And I would make sure of it. Not with rage, not with screaming, not with messy confrontation, but with strategy. With grace. With intelligence. He stole my work. But he had no idea. I had kept evidence. I had kept timestamps. I had kept prototypes. I had kept drafts, logs, commit histories, encrypted backups, private servers. And I had something more powerful than proof. I had patience. And when a patient person decides to break someone, they don't just break them. They dismantle them. Piece by piece. Ethan thought he won tonight. But the stage he stood on, the applause he soaked in, the cameras he smiled into, the reporters he impressed, that stage would be his downfall. And I would be the one to build it. From the shadows? Not anymore. I straightened my coat, pushed myself off the wall, and exhaled slowly. My breath fogged in the air like smoke. "It starts now," I whispered to myself. "You wanted a spotlight, Ethan. Enjoy it while you still can. Because 1 month from that night, I would make sure the spotlight burned him alive. Understood. I will continue the story, using full-page alignment, meaning long, uninterrupted paragraphs. No headings inside the story. Clean narrative flow. Fully immersive, page-filling text. Here is the continuation, picking up exactly where the previous text ended, still in viral YouTube long-form storytelling with cinematic pacing. The silence in the small office was almost suffocating after Daniel left. The door clicked behind him, and for a moment I just sat there at my desk, staring at the faintly vibrating surface as though it might reveal something new if I looked long enough. Part of me wanted to storm after him, scream, demand answers, demand respect. But a deeper, quieter part of me, the part that had been forming ever since the first time he'd stolen my work years ago, whispered to stay still. To think. To let the anger settle into something sharper, something useful. I inhaled once, long and slow, until the tightness in my chest dulled into something tolerable. Everyone underestimated the quiet ones. Daniel certainly did. I pulled my chair forward and opened my laptop again. The proposal draft still glowed on the screen, filled with my research, my structure, my data, and my analysis. The report he was about to present in London was this document. My document. Minus my name, minus my voice. But I'd been clever this time. Buried in the metadata of the master file was a string of initials, timestamps, and document history logs. All traceable, all legally binding, all saved to cloud backups he couldn't touch. A part of me felt guilty for how prepared I'd become for betrayal, but another part, the stronger part, felt justified. When you spend years being stepped on, you either break or you build armor. And I had built mine quietly, piece by piece. The office felt colder than usual as I continued refining the supporting files I'd created. I wasn't just planning to expose Daniel. I was preparing to prove, without question, that he had spent years stepping over me, stealing everything he could. No more half measures. No more second chances. If you wanted a war, fine. But I would choose the battlefield. My phone buzzed against the desk, breaking the stillness. A message from Mom lit up the screen. Dinner tonight? Don't be late. And remember, it's your sister's night, so please behave. I let out a short, humorless laugh. There it was. Harriet's night. Always Harriet's night. My accomplishments were quiet footnotes. Hers were spotlights. The prodigy child. The golden daughter. Mom would beam at her and call it pride. Dad would nod in satisfaction. And I would sit like a ghost at the edge of the table, expected to clap on command. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Daniel stole my work at the office, Harriet had spent 3 decades stealing the oxygen in every room we entered. Family gatherings had always been a stage for her. Tonight would be no different. Still, I typed out a quick reply that I'd be there. I had no intention of feeding family drama. I had bigger things to build, bigger storms forming. I shut down my laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up. As I walked through the office, the usual sounds hummed around me. Copiers, muted conversations, the faint drone of the air conditioning. People nodded politely as I passed, but no one really looked. To most of them, I was the dependable background character. The one who carried the office quietly. The one they leaned on without ever realizing it. That was about to change. Outside, the November wind in London cut sharply against my cheeks as I stepped out onto the pavement. I bought a coffee from the vendor near the station, mostly to warm my hands, and boarded the train home. The ride was long, with city lights blurring past the window and the smell of damp coats filling the carriage. I let the motion calm me, rocking me into a clearer focus. Every plan I made tightened, sharpened, locked into place. By the time I returned home to my small flat, the sky had already gone dark. I placed my bag on the table, plugged my laptop in, and began transferring files I knew I'd need later, screenshots, email threads, voice memos, revision logs. All meticulously detailed, all organized chronologically, all backed up in 3 places. Daniel would never see it coming. But tonight, family obligations came first. I changed into something presentable, a navy blouse, black trousers, hair tied back neatly, and called a cab. The ride to my parents' home was familiar, the roads winding through neighborhoods I'd long since memorized. When the car pulled up outside the brick house, the warm light glowing through the windows looked inviting enough, but I knew better. I stepped inside without knocking. The smell of roasted chicken and spices wrapped around me immediately. Voices floated from the dining room, Mom's cheerful chatter, Dad's dry humor, and Harriet's musical laugh that always seemed a bit too perfect. I removed my coat, smoothed my hair, and walked toward the voices. When I entered the room, Harriet was already sitting at the table, radiant as always. She looked up and offered a glance that skimmed over me with the faintest curve of indifference. Mum noticed me a beat later and clasped her hands in exaggerated delight. "Alice! Finally! We've been waiting." Dad stood to pour wine, nodding at me before resuming his seat. Harriet's eyes flicked down to my blouse as though grading it. Then she smiled, a delicate, superior smile that said everything she didn't need to say aloud. Her hair was styled immaculately, her makeup flawless, her posture picture-perfect. "Well," she said lightly, "glad you could make it. Busy at your little job?" The word little floated between us like a poisoned perfume, subtle but intentional. Mum didn't react. Dad didn't blink. But the air shifted just slightly, enough for me to feel it. I took my seat without flinching. "Very busy," I replied softly, a calm tone masking the storm beneath. "Some of us have full plates." Harriet's eyebrow twitched. She didn't like subtle hits she couldn't fully call out, especially not from me. Dinner began with the usual family dynamics, Mum bragging about Harriet's latest accomplishments, Dad nodding approvingly, Harriet pretending to be humble while practically glowing. I listened quietly, eating slowly, absorbing every detail. It was predictable, almost rehearsed. And every now and then, Harriet shot a glance at my clothing, my hands, my plate, as though comparing us in real time and finding me lacking. But then, midway through the meal, she lifted her glass and smirked at me with a careless confidence she should have saved for safer moments. "Honestly, Alice," she said, her voice sugary sweet, "I don't know how you manage. You're 30. and you still don't have anything. No partner, no house, no real career growth. It must be exhausting trying to keep up. The room froze. Mum didn't correct her. Dad didn't counter. They waited for my reaction the way people wait to see which way a tower of blocks will fall. My fork paused over my plate. A quiet settled over my mind, sharper than any anger. I lifted my head and met Harriet's eyes with a steady calm she hadn't anticipated. She thought she'd thrown the final blow. She thought she'd put me back into my place. Instead, she'd just confirmed something for me. This family would always underestimate me, until I forced them not to. I set down my fork gently, wiped my fingertips with a napkin, and smiled. A small, knowing smile. A smile Harriet would eventually replay in her mind over and over again, because she had no idea that in exactly 1 week, her entire life would change, and I would be the reason why. The next morning arrived with a kind of stillness the city rarely had. It was early, too early for buses to be crowded or for neighbors to be clattering about, but I was already awake, dressed, and waiting for the kettle to boil. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel shaky. I felt centered, balanced, like everything was finally aligning in the way it was always meant to. By 7:02 a.m., I emailed the file to Daniel exactly as promised. A perfectly packaged presentation, polished and gleaming, with the invisible watermark buried deep in the metadata. If he opened the file, the tracking would activate. If he forwarded it, the tracking would replicate. If he tried to extract the slides, every footprint would point only, exclusively to me. And the board? They'd be opening their inbox in less than an hour. I left my flat at 7:40, coat wrapped tight around me, boots clicking on the pavement as the morning chill brushed my cheeks. On the bus, I watched London's skyline shift through streaked windows, the Gherkin glinting in the distance, buses pulling past bridges, the Thames still half asleep. Everyone around me stared at their phones or dozed lightly. No one had any idea that one quiet woman on this bus was about to light a fuse that would explode in one of the most prestigious tech conferences in the UK. When I arrived at the office, everything looked normal. Too normal. People rushed around with coffees and papers. Printers hummed. Someone laughed near the elevator. The mundanity of it all almost made me smile. Because normal was about to be shattered. At 9:15 a.m., I watched Daniel stride in wearing a navy blazer he only ever put on 4 important days. His hair was gelled back, his posture inflated by the arrogance of someone who truly believed he'd gotten away with something. He saw me at my desk, gave me a charming grin that never reached his eyes, and said, "Morning, Alice. Ready for the big reveal?" I looked up slowly. "Absolutely. You." He smirked. "This is the kind of presentation that puts people on the map." "You're right," I said quietly. "It is." And he walked away, still believing the world belonged to him. At 10:04 a.m., the first email notification pinged in my inbox. Then another. Then 3 more. They came in rapid fire. One from a board member. One from the director. One from the conference coordinator. Each one contained a variation of the same message. "We need to see you. Now." I stood calmly, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward the executive wing, heels tapping a clean rhythm along the corridor. When I stepped inside the boardroom, every senior member of leadership was already seated, and on the large screen at the front of the room was Daniel's presentation, but open in my original file with the metadata displayed in bold lettering. Author, Alice Hartwell. Created, 8:12 a.m. Version history, 37 logged edits. Contributor, none. Forwarded by Daniel Howell, 9:32 a.m. Daniel entered the room a few seconds later, late, confident, oblivious. As soon as he saw what was on the screen, his face drained of color so quickly it was almost impressive. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again as if rebooting his entire brain. I can explain." "No," the director said flatly. "You really can't." There was no shouting, no theatrics, just quiet disappointment that crushed him more effectively than anger ever could. They confronted him calmly, methodically, with every piece of evidence laid out like a legal exhibit. He stuttered. He sweated. He tried to blame me. He tried to insist he'd guided the work. He even claimed he'd been mentoring me. The board stared at him as if watching an actor forget his lines. Then, finally, the director turned to me. Alice, he said, would you be willing to present your own work today? It's exceptional. And frankly, you're the only person qualified to explain it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded. Daniel sat there, looking like a man who had just watched the floor fall out from under him. And I walked past him without a single glance. By 11:30 a.m., I was standing on the stage at the London conference. The room was packed with industry leaders, journalists, investors, and partner firms, including, faintly in the middle row, Harriet. She tilted her head when she recognized me, confused. Good. The lights dimmed. The spotlight brightened. My name flashed on the screen. Not Daniel's. Mine. And I spoke. Clear. Confident. Articulate. Every slide flowed. Every question was answered with precision. I watched executives nod. I watched journalists scribble. I watched people lean forward with interest. And I watched Harriet's expression slowly warp into horror as she realized the groundbreaking integration model she had bragged about over dinner had never belonged to her beloved brother. When the presentation ended, the room erupted into applause so loud it echoed off the walls. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt something purer, something I hadn't felt in years. Value. Recognition. Truth. Afterwards, the director pulled me aside. We're offering you the lead position, he said. Formal announcement will go out next week. I thanked him politely, then stepped outside into the lobby where people were mingling, shaking hands, congratulating each other. And that was when Harriet appeared. She marched toward me, face tight, voice trembling. You humiliated me, she hissed. I met her eyes, calm as water. I didn't humiliate you, I said softly. I just stopped letting you live off a lie. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For once, she had no comeback, no retort, no weapon. She walked away without another word. Later that night, I sat on a bench overlooking the Thames, the city lights glittering on the water's surface. My phone buzzed with messages, congratulations, interviews requested, invitations to collaborate. Daniel had been dismissed pending an internal review. Harriet's firm had postponed her project indefinitely. The world felt quiet, peaceful, balanced. I exhaled slowly, the cool air brushing past my lips. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, precise, earned. And I had earned this. My brother took credit for my work. A month later, the world learned the truth. Publicly, sweetly, perfectly. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets, stood from the bench, and began walking home, back to a life I had rebuilt with my own hands, my own mind, and finally my own name. And I didn't need anyone's permission to shine anymore.